in my mind, that's what really got me thinking that cyber as a risk is now very much on a fast track to becoming a board issue, if potentially not the top board issue of our time. And I think that time is pretty squarely arisen right now.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mark Greisiger with Net Diligence. Here doing our monthly cyber risk blog interview with an expert in the industry. I have the great fortune today of speaking with Scott Canry, who is the CEO of Axio. Scott, hello, and thank you so much for being here today.
Mark, thank you very much. Great to be with you and spend a little time with your audience.
Yeah, it's good seeing your face. I know we're coming out of the pandemic, and it's great starting to see people at actual in-person conferences. So look forward to seeing you there soon. And me and Scott go back many, many years. Scott was a longtime cyber leader in the industry. He's been many years at Aon and now many years, quite frankly, at Axio. So we'll jump right into this. Today's conversation, we want to talk about kind of the D&O exposure that stems from cyber. And who better to speak about this issue than with Scott? So Scott, let's just, an easy way to jump into this conversation. I would like to note that I know the Axio released a cybersecurity guide for boards of director last week, and it seems like a large focus for the company. Can you give me and the audience a little bit of background on that, please?
Yeah, sure. No, perfect place to jump right in. I mean, Mark, you know me. I had 2 tours of duty in the insurance industry, kind of growing up at Aon, along with the cyber insurance products. So the first wave, going back to the beginning of my career in 2003 through 2009, really saw the cyber insurance wave pick up with respect to privacy breaches and all the data regs in the United States, and then abroad, that served as a big trigger for really for the first wave of the product. Took a couple of years off for grad school, and then one of the things that drew me back to the insurance industry was the recognition that while I was in grad school, the world became known, or I should say the Stuxnet virus became known to the world, which in my mind meant that cyber now had the potential to be a type of risk that can cause the entire spectrum of loss, far beyond the data breaches that the industry had kind of gotten used to. And thinking about those possibilities, especially knowing kind of what the core purpose of Stuxnet was at the time, which was to materially impact Iran's ability to enrich uranium, made me think, this now puts cyber on an incredibly different plane from a risk standpoint. And if you think about the massive, and now we've seen it, the massive, operational impacts that a cyber event can cause, and God forbid when something goes boom in the future because of a cyber event, kind of timely given the events of the world this week. In my mind, that's what really got me thinking that cyber as a risk is now very much on a fast track to becoming a board issue, if potentially not the top board issue of our time. And I think that time is pretty squarely arisen right now.
No, you raised some great points. Let's for me, what's so interesting about this is I went not too long ago to a football game with a major Philadelphia area CEO, runs a big banking group for many years. And it's the one thing he brought up to my attention. He knows loosely my background, but that's what he wanted to talk about. Like, he wanted to learn about, where do we see the cyber trends going? He is worried about board level, liability. He said it's the only risk issue that keeps him up at night. And he's a major banker, and all senior people, constantly asking about it. So, I just think it's a topic that's only going to grow and morph as time goes by. So with that, I'd like to say, is the legal climate and the case law lining up to support all this that we're talking about? Do the D&Os, should they be concerned about this right now?
Yeah, I'd say if it's if it's not there already, it's nearly there, and that could be a matter of the next piece of litigation that succeeds relative to a cybersecurity event. A couple of things that we're attentive to, and that I know that are making their way through a lot of the legal publications and whatnot, especially given the last 12 months of cybersecurity events, certainly including some of the biggest in history, traces back to, I think it was the mid to late 90s. Caremark was a piece of litigation in the Delaware courts that really opened up a greater avenue of liability against directors and officers for failures of oversight to supervise, their organizations, which included one of the kind of the legs of that case, had to do with, or one of the legs of the decision had to do with, risks that should have been understood and acted on, ideally to prevent the harm that was ultimately caused. Knowing, of course, that in the D&O world, you don't have to succeed 100% of the time, but you have to be reasonably informed. And post Caremark, there's been a lot of follow-on litigation that have kind of opened the doors even wider. With one just from the last year or two, having to do with Boeing and relating to the 737 MAX, disasters or crashes that happened. The first one certainly made the company aware that there was a potential problem. The board was alleged to have not acted and acted and understood as quickly as they should have, as a result, that kind of dynamic transposed to the world of cybersecurity, very squarely points and opens the door to the possibility that, in today's day and age, boards very much should be aware of what cyber means to their businesses as a risk, take necessary and reasonably informed steps to mitigate the risk to the greatest extent possible. And if they fail to act accordingly, at least according to kind of those principles, and something really, really bad happens, again, whether it's the next case or we're already there, in my mind, it's a top concern.
Yeah, great point, Scott. So what does this all mean from a coverage standpoint? How do you think that the D&O underwriting is going to evolve relative to cyber risk?
I think kind of knowing back to what I previously saw and thinking about it in the context of how cyber insurance is underwritten, I think it's probably a bit of a different flavor, but at the same time, I don't think it's really too much different in terms of the core issues that need to be understood. I think the different flavor that I alluded to, or maybe just the distinction, is the fact that, boards, they need to understand the risk as they do any other risk in terms of the business from a financial standpoint, in terms of business impact. So they really need the translation of the technical viewpoints that a cybersecurity program is run on, that the cyber insurance product is underwritten on, just in terms of how that process entails. But, candidly, unless the security leaders within an organization have the ability to provide that translated viewpoint, then the boards are not going to get the perspective that they actually need to carry their duties out. So in my mind, you could look at really the two sides of the same coin, is just to say it's almost really the same process or the same viewpoints that need to be had going forward. Because again, if the boards don't get the translated perspective into the business, that's where they'll fail to understand where the risks really are, not focus the enterprise accordingly, and leave themselves open to the avenues of recourse that I talked about before.
Thanks, Scott. Let's summarize and wrap this maybe conversation up, talking a little bit about D&O impact. Like we see, of course, in the cyber risk insurance markets, some challenging times on conditions and things like that. How do you think is there an impact potentially facing a D&O front because of what's happening in cyber?
Well, certainly first and foremost, I would anticipate that the market conditions of the last year that everybody's really attentive to now from a cyber insurance standpoint, probably have some trickle down effect, or maybe trickle up effect, if you want to call it that, and maybe that's a little bit further out. I'd also be interested in, and it's probably too early to tell yet. I don't know if there's any actual instances on record, but like we know, for example, some of our clients and our subscribers, because of the challenging cyber insurance marketplace, have elected to self-insure the risk, or cut down on limits because they don't want to continue to bear, or they don't want to bear the larger costs that are hitting them. Which, if you think about how that could play forward, if that company makes that decision internally for budget purposes or whatever, subsequently has an event, now they own that risk, it's on their own balance sheet. You'd have to believe that could create a pretty unfavorable situation in light of, or in the minds of the shareholders who could say in retrospect, you let a little bit more of an increase than you wanted to. Have you did not purchase cyber insurance anymore? Put that risk on our balance sheet. Now there's been a big event. Now that's coming out of my pocket from a shareholder return standpoint. You'd almost suppose in that situation that the D&O policy has taken on the risk of what had previously been the cyber insurance policy in place. So who knows whether that plays out or not? But it's not tough to see that potentially happening.
Yeah. Well, more on this topic, man, hopefully at future net diligence conferences. So, Scott, thank you so much. Great points you raised there. The audience, you folks can learn more about Scott and his team at axio.com, and we'll be publishing some links to his site. Scott, thank you again. Hopefully you have a wonderful week here.
Likewise, you, Mark, as well. Thank you, and the net diligence team. Really appreciate the opportunity, and absolutely see you soon in person at one of your conferences.